Alright, so I've been very talkative as of late in my videos, and that is due to lack of caffeine. I'm actually kicking coffee, but today was May Day, so I had a lot of bad food and a lot of caffeine. It is 3 in the morning, and I am going to go to bed probably about 4 or 5. So, I was having May Day thoughts. You know, centered around, of course, communism, capitalism, class warfare, everything like that. So, I was thinking, see, I had this idea about the original social contract, and I've said this before in places, was actually a compact between the lower class and the upper class to prey on other societies, right? So, for instance, in Rome, the lower class and the upper class were often at war. The Optimates and the Populares, and that's throughout Roman history. You see class warfare, particularly after the Second Punic War. So it is a real thing that's happened in history. We know that much. It's not as marketed in America, and there are reasons for that. But Rome, once it became imperial, was exactly that. It was a combination of upper class money and leadership and lower class muscle to conquer the known world, essentially, and plunder it. So you have that first type of pre-industrial civilization, right? Whether it be in Mesopotamia or all the way in Rome, whatever, having been established for the purpose of predation. And you see a lot of class warfare in that. Being a science fiction author and a person who thinks about this, I do have some ideas about where the future is going to go, and I'll talk about that in a second. But American society, at least as a entity, didn't experience the same kind of class war, and there's a few reasons why. One is capitalism, which is a very dynamic economic system which we've had from the beginning, contrary to a lot of socialist claims. It's a very dynamic, revolutionary system. Of course, Slavoj Žižek sees that, talks about capitalism being very dynamic and very revolutionary, and we can see that in history. But anyway, so limited the ability of people to be super poor like they were in Rome, because in Rome people were literally day laborers, or at least the majority of people were on literally edge of death, which is why the dole was so necessary. People would literally starve and die otherwise. It wasn't the case in American society. American society was also a frontier society, so we had constant room for expansion, so you didn't have the same kind of closed, settled society with rigid class distinctions, because there was always a frontier to go to. Now, the frontier is a huge part of American history, and it really only closed at the end of the 19th century with the last of the wars in the West and the closing of the Wild West. And so that's our first real period. And then if you want to look at what happened after that, it's our period of foreign expansion, which began with Wilson. It really began with the Spanish-American War, actually. And probably, if you want to trace it as a historical period, it advanced all the way to probably Obama's first term. Okay, and you can count it as that because that's when we last did a major military invasion in Iraq. And I think when they look back on our history and they classify American history, they're going to see that as the equivalent of like the last of the five good emperors, right? That's where we are. So we're about to enter a crisis period. We're already in a crisis period, but our crisis period is going to be much worse. So I just wanted to do a little secular eschatology here. So the United States has been in relative economic decline since the end of the Second World War, meaning our portion of the global economy has shrunk, while the rest of the world has increased theirs, which is pretty natural. However, with the rise of global trade and globalism itself, that's going to have a similar effect on us as did the circumnavigation of Africa by the Portuguese did on the Ottomans, right? So they basically just completely bypassed the Ottomans and inadvertently started their decline. So global trade is enabling all kinds of countries to leap ahead of us, and it's not stoppable, and we're not going to be able to reverse it. So that's our economic reality. The crisis period, of course, is for the United States going to consist of economic shocks, pandemics, obviously, ecological catastrophe, the likes of what the world's never seen, right? So the problem with environmental issues is that they extend beyond notions of who owns the means of production. It's not a problem of who owns the means of production. It's not a problem of socialists, people owning the means of production versus, private ownership and capitalism, because frankly, communist regimes have been quite terrible environmentally. In fact, worse. What happened in the Aral Sea? Where the fuck is it, right? So to me, there's no centralized solution for any of that. And so we're facing peak resources, whether it be oil, or whether it be rare earth minerals, right? Both of which are going to be incredibly problematic for us. And then you have climate change, which is going to literally flood the world, cause a refugee crisis. The refugee crisis has already started. However, we're talking hundreds of millions of people are going to be displaced depending on what the temperatures do, right? We're going to spend trillions of dollars on seawalls. We're going to run out of concrete, okay? We're literally not going to have enough resources to do that. And the only place we're going to be able to get rare earth minerals is the solar system, near Earth asteroids, and the asteroid belt itself. The only place we could really get petroleum would be Titan. I don't know if you know how far that is from Earth, but so our period right now is really not a decline. It's crisis, because decline is different than crisis. Decline comes after crisis, right? So we're in the crisis. We have what historians are going to see is a completely insane person as president, right? No doubt in my mind that they're going to write about Trump just like they wrote about Caligula. Like, we're literally going to see that. No matter what any conservatives think right now, they're drinking the Kool-Aid and they love him, and that's fine. People love Caligula. People love De Niro, before they went totally off the rails. And anyway, that's our eschatology, our end, right? So you're going to see the economic share of the United States shrink, possibly to number 2 in the world. You've already seen a complete destruction of the middle class, to the point to where the middle class is almost a myth in the United States at this point. And because economically the Kuznets curve predicts that the property holders, no matter who they are always going to outstrip GDP growth. So if GDP growth is like 4% and you have an investment class, and hey, I've owned investments, a lot of people have. It's not to say it's just like a weird class that nobody can be a part of. But people who own investments, the property, like I own property, it's going to appreciate faster than the economy. And so they're always going to be able to retain and build more wealth and then pass that down. So that's why you have rich people getting richer and nobody else moving if wages aren't growing, okay? And if you don't have an economy or an economic policy from the government side that at least redistributes some of that so people can get a rung on the ladder, get to that first rung and climb. We're not talking about an equal outcome where they're guaranteed to get to the finish line and be exactly as, Bill Gates, but just to get to the starting point, right? If you don't do that, then this gap grows, okay? Here's the problem, guys, conservatives. If this doesn't get fixed, if you have a complete underclass and a complete upper class, and everybody in between is a myth who's living on debt, in debt up to their eyeballs for their housing and their fucking college, and can't afford to have kids, and it's a disaster, right? If that happens, and the only way and the political system does not respond in an effective manner, and I don't know if it can, right, because of lobbying, then you basically have the recipe for a revolution, and not a nice one. Okay, I'm not saying this is like there's people that like love to talk about guillotining the rich, and there's people on the right that love to talk about shooting liberals. Okay, so think about Syria and imagine that in your town. Imagine Christian Dominionists massacring gays, lesbians, transgender people. Imagine them imposing their religion. Imagine federal government fighting with them. Imagine right-wing militias. Imagine left-wing militias. Imagine that entire scenario. Imagine your city's leveled. Imagine foreign intervention in the United States. Very bad outcome, right? But if we don't get a handle on that economic reality, if there's no way to stop that, you're guaranteed a destruction of the American polity, right? On top of the ecological issues, which are going to, frankly, overcome the ability of governments to respond to them. Because if you have hundreds of millions of refugees flooding into the global north, I can guarantee you there's going to be a tilt in politics towards authoritarianism. Now, Snowden has talked about turnkey totalitarianism, right? In terms of structures that have been built at the federal level, where there'd be surveillance, or let's take ICE detention, how brutal that is for some people, black sites, all that craziness, right? Laws that can allow people to get detained without trial. We've seen that. All the crazy stuff we saw during the Bush years on steroids and applied to the American populace as a whole. But imagine if America was faced with millions of people just pouring across because their country had no more arable land. Imagine how the American political system would respond. Imagine how the electorate would respond. It would not be open arms because it just wouldn't. So, eschatology, right? It's the study of how religions predict the end of the world. And in this case, you would see an expansion of the sixth great extinction, economic calamity. You would see, again, the pandemics are going to come and come and come because we are systematically stripping habitat from every ecosystem that's left. The reason this came out of China isn't because it was made in China like in some bioweapon lab. That's idiocy. It's because China is deforesting itself continuously. And they're awakening viruses, zoonotic viruses, right? That's where this coronavirus came from. And as we increase in number, 7, 8, 9 billion, the viruses are going to adapt to be part of us, to take advantage of us, to multiply, right? That's what they do. Our water's going to get worse. We're going to run out of that. Peak oil is eventually going to happen. We're going to run out of ways. Now we lucked out with fracking, but how many other ways can we extract oil? And renewables don't work, not in the way they claim they do. They still require fossil fuels to operate. They require coal-fired power plants to start their mechanisms, right? And we can't do nuclear because we have people that are against it, even thorium reactors, right? Fusion is 100 years away, probably, at least. It's a technological leap, right? Exploring the solar system, great. Incredibly expensive. If we have to mine asteroids, that's the ultimate putting in more resources than you're getting out. We'd have to have a whole bevy of technologies, right? It's the equivalent of an Alaskan Inuit Eskimo going from a canoe to building a port and modern shipping, you know, that's where we're at relatively. So you'd have to have spaceports, you'd have to have probably robotic mechanisms to mine and process the ore, and then orbital factories, right? And just that's not there. Okay, so 1 or 200 years away, and we might not even make it that long. So outlook is not good. That's what I think. But ultimately, I think the when it all settles, we're going to see a new kind of society arise. The new kind of society is going to be the younger class, right? And the upper class utilizing artificially intelligent algorithms and technocratic means. And we're going to come together. It's already happened. We're going to come together in the equivalent of a new social contract. It's going to be like the leap from hunter-gathering to horticulture to agriculture, right? That's what we're going to see. Those technocrats with transnational means, the ability to influence and buy governments, and everyone else globally kind of melded together. And so your possible dystopian future is that with our notions of civil rights just eliminated, like dead, okay, because their rights are made up. The weakening of countries, essentially over time as we become more of a monoculture through trade and through global diplomacy. We are literally going to just meld together culture. It's already happening. America has a monoculture, which is like spread across the planet because of our influence on the internet and our cultural influence through movies, right? So, and then this new arrangement is going to have to weather ecological collapse, the sixth great extinction, climate change, exploring the solar system for resources, and our notions of economics are not going to survive. Our notions of political systems are not going to survive. And you're going to have people looking back on this period, and they're going to be able to identify when it happened. Let's say America went into a holding pattern, essentially with Trump, and then we're probably just going to have a series of the same presidents. I mean, I think even if Trump loses, we're going to have a vegetable, as the other option. The norms in the United States, the political norms, are never going to return to normal. Never. Something has changed in the conservative movement. Okay, something is dark, right? You used to see a lot of left-wing conspiracy theories, especially during the Bush years, where you literally could not have a conversation with a left-wing person without them mentioning that Bush did 9/11. So that darkness in the conservative movement has pushed it towards a neo-fascistic agenda, essentially. So it's cult-like worship of Trump, okay? It's denial of the press. It's not just, oh, the media is liberal. It's denial of the press and everything their press is reporting. We literally have an objective situation with a pandemic and people denying it's happening, and that is completely insane. This is a very, very bad sign. We're very sick as a culture. So the conservative movement has become so intertwined with conspiracy theories, so intertwined with anti-rational thinking, that it is off the reservation. And what they've done, what's become emboldened by Trump is stupidity. Okay, so it's just straight up stupidity. Trump has emboldened people who have no education. Trump has emboldened people who have no empathy, and that's where we are. And we're never going to return to that functional civility, that functional political norm where conversations are possible. It's going to be just a spoil system all the way through. And of course, the Constitution as a document has been consistently eroded over the last, I would say 50 years by the executive branch. The executive branch has grown massively in power to where the presidency is definitely imperial. I see no reason why that would stop. But yeah, I just wanted to vomit some thoughts about the future, so some dystopian stuff. We can all hope that we just become some nice little democratic country and we fix our problems, and it's not going to happen. You can't fix problems of industrial civilization with industrial civilization. It's literally just not going to happen. We're going to have these problems no matter what. But yeah, in 100 years, when they write the histories, when the new global political system, whatever it is, writes their histories, they're going to be able to identify that Trump Trump's administration was the beginning of a crisis. It'll probably last 20 or 30 years at least until our economy moves down. It's not a given that China's going to come up, but it probably is. But now until the Chinese ascendancy will be our holding pattern, in which case they will probably dismantle bits of the American empire, and we're probably going to be like the British. We're probably still going to be powerful, but it's going to be a faded myth of greatness, right? And so you'll have the same attitude. You have a lot of Americans that will want to recapture our glory, much like the Nazis want to recapture the glory of Imperial Germany. And of course, America has its own stab in the back legend in terms of military defeats. Anytime our military is bested strategically, like in Vietnam, we have, and that's when the conservative war with the media began. It began with Vietnam. Okay, it began with the idea that these reporters were making things up and we were really winning the war. And of course, anybody that studies it on a deep level, not just those tactical battles, but on a deep level, studies the strategy and looks at it, will discover the United States had no clue how to fight that war. They had no political will to fight that war, and ultimately it was a lost cause. Okay, so it just wasn't going to work. And once we committed to high intensity conflict, we were going to be driven out. But the conservative idea is that we never lost the battle in Vietnam, and we would have won the war, and it ultimately didn't matter if we never lost the battle because we continuously abdicated every piece of ground we won in that war. And if you look at the attritional strategy of Westmoreland, you'll see major problems. It's like Falkenhayn and Verdun. It's really asinine. It's a waste of lives. And that war destroyed the military in a lot of ways. It had to be rebuilt by Abrams and through an all volunteer force. But that's the beginning of a stab in the back legend. And the Republican war with the media began with that. That was the inciting event. Before then, the liberal press thing was like a John Birch Society type thing. Before, of course, now it's all over. It's been all over talk radio for a long time. Where if you're a Republican and you hear a fact you do not enjoy, you just say you just shoot the messenger and you don't even listen to the message. So, which is interesting because there's a progressive critique of the media as corporatist and imperialist. Of course, progressives are a very small percentage of the American electorate as a whole. But you're going to see more of that. If we engage in any military adventurism and we don't come out on top, they're just going to blame the media. And it's unfortunate. As flawed as the media is, it is required for being informed. The press as constituting the alternative press is the worst of yellow journalism writ large, multiplied by 100, by 1,000 probably. And so that cannot be a valid alternative because there's no ethics, there's no journalism in it. It's just bereft of anything that we would identify as ethical reporting, and it simply exists as a partisan echo chamber, whether they be left or right wing sources, leading to a misinformed electorate across the board. Very, very difficult to overcome that. So we are paying for our lack of investment in critical thinking and education. You know, if you don't teach logic and critical thinking at the high school level in a very literal way, and you don't teach philosophy, then you're going to have a problem. But yeah, those are my thoughts on eschatology.